Hi, guys. Welcome to the latest podcast of YarninBlak. Today is a really special episode because it is the 100th episode. 100 episodes we've been doing. And I wouldn't have anybody else but Ricki Spencer join me today for the 100th episode.
Yay!
If you have been following us, you would know that Ricki was my first guest, my 33rd guest, my 66th guest, my 99th guest, and my 100th guest. So before I do start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm currently on. I'm here in Bourbon Q on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people here today and introduce Ricki, who I also acknowledge.
Thank you so much, AJ. And well, happy birthday, 100, yay! And to think I was right there at the initial embryonic stage. And, I also would like to pay my respects to elders past and those who are emerging, that the lands of which we are coming today have yet to be seeded. And I'm coming from West Footscray out here in So wonderful to be with you, AJ. And how incredible, 100 episodes. I've got to throw it to you and ask you, what's that journey been like for you to have 100 yarns?
Oh, wow. I think the thing I love the most, and I think it's the reason I set it up, was to hear the diversity of Aboriginal voices. Because there wasn't a place where, there's other podcasts that talk a bit about Aboriginal businesses but I just wanted to be raw and just hear the voices of Aboriginal people and the different experiences that people actually have that make them unique to themselves. And that was the purpose of starting the podcast series 3 years ago. But it's kind of got a bit of a life of its own now, because where I was looking for guests to come on, now people are saying, can I come on and talk? Can I be part of those discussions? Can I get my story heard? Can I actually have my voice out there? And so I'm not turning people away, of course, but I'm learning to also be comfortable in myself as well. Because if you notice, if you actually go back and watch the first few podcasts, I was always the one hiding in the background, making the guest, which is part of my job as the host, but I'm more comfortable in front of the screen as well now. So they're the two things I've learned, and that everybody has their own unique story. And the biggest one, as you and I both know, social workers, I can't judge anybody for their story. And it's an honor and privilege to actually be able to hear the stories that people bring to these sessions.
Oh, absolutely, AJ. It's been, a wonderful journey to know you for so many years and to see how much you keep flourishing and doing so much for the community. And it's like, I think we sometimes people forget that, the hard work that someone like yourself has done. You've studied really comprehensively, your nursing to social work and, community development, and, you've really put the whole soul into all your work, and you give so much. And it's like everyone benefits from your ways of being and your wisdom. The fact that you deliver the mental health first aid course, and I think, to correct me if I'm wrong, was it 10,000 people have now been trained? Is that right?
10,000 people, 883 courses.
And just to think about that to people who are listening, you know, this is something that AJ has been passionate about. How many people, I say, out there can stick to something, to be passionate about this, doing it over and over with the same enthusiasm and care? And I always say, I know AJ doesn't say, but how many lives has he saved as a result of doing this? And I think that's what's most important, the number of lives that this course brings. It's one of the most effectual training spaces, and I've always said this privately to AJ and for those who are listening to really recommend, there are so many, I know there are first aid courses out there and they all have their merits, but this one is specifically tailored that AJ has worked over many years to develop and refine that really works well with our communities. And I think that if every, teacher who's or is about to commence teaching social work, nurse was to do it, you would get maps a little bit more of an understanding and learn from AJ's years of working in community, and he still does, that you still do, to really kind of bring it into your own practice and really develop that. And I was just thinking, AJ, to throw a bit to you, out of your 10,000, has there ever been a time when you've thought, wow, you know, this, you meet people in your course because you met so many, that's really captured you to think, oh my God, this person's going to really make a difference? Like, because you've seen so many people come through the system.
Yeah. Look, I think the the people that I love working with the most are sometimes our elders in community
Mm,
that come to our course that have experienced mental health themselves or have had family members experience mental health themselves, have even had suicide in their own family, their own children. And it's a safe space that they come to and they might be able to share that. And I'm not there to blame them for not knowing what they don't know or didn't know at a particular moment in time. But I hear them. I love those moments when you see that you can see the light bulb go off in the top of their head and they go, oh, wow, I'm getting this, that this is a conversation. And I might have missed the opportunity to have a conversation with my nephew or my son 10 years ago. But AJ, you've given me the skills and knowledge to know how to talk to someone today, tonight, tomorrow, next week. And it's a little weird a little bit because I can't always see the impact that I have on people, because people come to the workshop for 2 days and then I don't see them again. But because I've trained over 10,000 people, I walk in Melbourne, or I'm walking down the street, I'm in Victoria Market, I'm at Springvale, I'm somewhere, someone will come up to me, and especially some of the elders, and go, oh, AJ, I'm so glad that I did that course with you. And then they share me a story of how they were able to implement mental health first aid into their life. And the story is always very similar. Like I noticed the signs and symptoms in my young nephew, and no one was really asking him questions. And you taught me not to be scared to start a conversation. So I went up and asked him, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And they told me, I'm not doing too well, Nan. And I was able to explore that. What do you mean by that? And I started hearing those invitations that, oh, this person could be at risk. And I wasn't scared to ask that question either, AJ. Are you thinking about suicide? Because before I thought it was a scary question. Now I know it's not a scary question. And the person said, yes, they were. And I went, great. No, not great, that was suicidal, but great. I knew I could do something. And I was able to take them straight down to VARS. I was able to make that phone call to 1-800-YARNS, or I was able to talk to Beyond Blue. But I got them the help that they required. Thus, they're still with us today. I never had that opportunity before, but now I've had that discussion. And I think it's those stories that I love hearing, because then I can see what the social impact is that I've had on people, but the social impact that mental health first aid has also had on community and mob at the same time. Because it is still a topic that is still very hard to talk about. Yet in the course, and I know you've done the course as well, Ricki, that 1 out of 5 Australians currently have a diagnosis of a mental illness. 1 out of 5 Australians are walking around with signs and symptoms of a mental illness. And that's in the mainstream. for Aboriginal people, it's nearly half the population actually has a diagnosable mental illness, and nearly 2 out of 5 are walking around in high psychological distress most of the time. It is so common, but it's still one of the hardest topics to actually have those conversations with. And I'm not scared to actually have those conversations. I'm not scared of getting to people's heads that we need to stop not talking about it, but to talk about it. Yeah.
Look, that's the way you've explained it is so it really sits close to me because I think, like you said, those really key words to not be scared and have a conversation. And I think for anyone listening, and that's all it takes is to have a conversation and be open to it and vulnerable, maybe vulnerable, yeah, maybe a little bit of vulnerability in that, and to see, you may not have all the answers, but having someone just to listen and be with them and sit with them in their time of need is probably the best thing you can do. And I think that's the one thing with your course, it really does give you that sort of um, strength to really to have that conversation. And it's not about, as you said, being an expert or being a counselor. It's just about being authentic, being open to whatever a young or older person is saying, and walking through with them, as we would do, walk with them through that journey and to whatever that would be so they don't feel alone, that
Yeah.
somebody's listening. So I guess for you, it's incredible. So I guess for you, I wanted to ask you too, like, how do you deliver these, I think, very emotionally charged courses? How do you then cope with that after you do a course? Because it must you get heightened, people share their stories of pain,
Yeah.
maybe loss. How does AJ work with that information?
I've learnt over time, and and I don't know whether my social work training helped me to do this as well, to stop and actually go, this is not my story, this is their story.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they're sharing with me, I can't say to them they're wrong or right for thinking something, but I'm feeling honored and privileged that they feel comfortable in sharing what they're feeling with me, which means I detach myself away from the story and the narrative in terms of the emotions that go with that. But I definitely take on the wording and the understanding and the empathy that the person is actually displaying to me.
I wanted to ask you too, AJ, and for
Yeah.
those listeners who may not know, I think it was last year that you finished a course that you did, and I was curious because I was interested in that course. I think it was it that if it
Oh,
was
the
the trauma,
yeah, the trauma
Indigenous. Can you
informed recovery.
can
Yeah.
you tell everyone and myself a little bit about it because I was quite interested, and I forgot to ask you privately, but maybe we'll share it with everyone. What was that course about, and what do you think that you've taken away from that that's added to your practice?
Yeah, look, it's a course that's done through the University of Wollongong, coordinated by Dr. Liz Dale. And it really does look at trauma-informed practice for Aboriginal people. And what I love about it is that it is project-based, so you can base the learnings around anything that you do and stop for a second and actually go, let's really explore a person's trauma that might be coming into a particular program that you're actually running. And then if I understand where the trauma is actually coming from, then maybe then I can actually start to really work in a trauma-informed way. And what I mean by that is that I work in lots of organizations, as you know, and I go and talk to
Mm,
clinicians all the time, and they talk about working with Aboriginal people. They go, oh, yes, I work within a trauma-informed way, trauma-informed,
mm,
trauma-informed.
mm.
But then they can't even tell me basic history of Aboriginal people in this country. Like you ask them about the 1967 referendum and they've got no idea, or about when the apology actually occurred, Well, they're two really significant events that change the lives of the Aboriginal elders in our community right now. And if they can't even tell me what those events mean, how the hell can they do trauma informed practice? Because they don't actually understand where the trauma's coming from. Because people think our trauma just comes from colonization and stolen generations. But even when you ask them, well, what do you mean by stolen generations? They're still talking about people from the 40s and 50s, not people like our age, and even a bit younger. And so it is about being able to design programs with that trauma-informed lens always there. And it's a fabulous course. There's it's only, I think, two or three units to do the grad cert, and then there's the graduate diploma level, and then there's a master's level of it. I only did the grad cert level because, as you know, I've studied quite a bit. I've got 3 masters already. I didn't need another master's, but it gave me that understanding of what does a trauma informed really look like. Because yes, it gets thrown around a lot, but I really don't think people understand trauma informed until you've actually pulled it apart and actually, well, tell me where the person's trauma is, because it can affect the daily interactions that we have with people. Now, for example, 50% of our Aboriginal kids are in out-of-home care. Now, I need to remember that, and to understand the trauma-informed approach would be, I'm not going to ask a young kid up front in a session, so how's your family going, if I don't know exactly where this kid is right this minute. Are they living at home with their family, or are they in the child protection system? Because the trauma-informed approach would be me checking in with them going, who are you currently living with at the moment, and how do you feel about that living arrangement? Because then I can actually place their trauma in a place where it really is, and then the conversations I'll have are not going to be trauma triggering for the person, if that makes sense. But I would recommend this course. They do offer it to Aboriginal workforce, but they also offer it to non-Indigenous people working in the Aboriginal space as well. But really well worth it.
Well, I think it's incredible, and I think you've hit the nail on the head when you say it's about, that practical example about, thinking about the context before you ask that question. Because if you go with an assessment tool and, and I think people can learn from that training, like what you've said. And I don't know if you deliver training in this area now, but if you do, be great, because for those who are doing intake, especially in social welfare, in hospitals, even, psychiatric spaces, to really think about the way you said that, who do you live with currently, and work from that, the context, before you start saying, where's where's your family? And then they're having to tell a very uncomfortable situation and relive that feeling and disclosing before they even know you, and to know what you're going to do with that information. And I think I just love the way you articulated that so well. And I think what you've said to me, it really reminds me too now when and I'm so happy you mentioned it to your audience, that please stop saying you're trauma informed working in community if you have not read up and spoken to people who've gone through the 1967 referendum, the sorry statement made in I think it was late 80s or 90s. My time frame isn't as good.
Oh, the apology was 2008. But people don't even know about the Paul Keating speech, for example, which was...
And that's what I was thinking. And I've also thinking the time with Gough Whitlam as well, with the soil, picking up the soil, the time with the elder, and then the tent embassy, all these things are pinnacle points. And I think, like you said, AJ, it's like yeah, don't bandy those words around. So, oh, I'm trauma informed. If you've only done you've just read something and you're band-aiding it on because you're doing more harm than good and you're not being authentic. So I think the big lesson for all of us too is to go back and read through everything's now on, you can look up various, ATSIC websites, and all those to talk about, Reconciliation Victoria, all those spaces now that have really good information about past events and really become yourself informed. And what you don't know or not clear, then reach out to your local communities and elders and ask if you can, get buy someone some lunch and have a chat and maybe have a conversation, or like yourself, reach out to yourself and spend like do a mentorship with yourself. And I'm going to ask you too. I know it's all turned into the AJ ask you, but I want to ask you too because I wanted to
It's
always
me.
ask you the mentorship you do with young people. How long have you been doing that with
Oh,
Indigenous young people?
about nearly 10 years now. And I kind of fell into it because the first school I actually worked with was Scots College. And
Hmm.
I actually went out there to do a workshop on teen mental health with the Aboriginal kids. And they really loved my style of interaction with them, that they went to the coordinator and they go, oh, can we get AJ to come back and talk? Can we get AJ to come back and do some activities with us? And that was 9 years ago. I started off in 2016 with the school. And I've seen that the young boys, which are young boys when I start working with them, turn into fine young men.
Mm.
I watch them graduate. I'm still part of their lives once they've
Mm.
graduated. Many of them have been guests on the podcast series that I invite back to catch up with them. But what I love about it is that I try to explore Aboriginal culture that might be outside their own per se culture. Now, some of the boys may not know much about being Aboriginal or growing up Aboriginal. Some do. Some have lots of experience, some have little. I'm not trying to focus on any one particular Aboriginal culture, but getting them to understand the many different aspects. So that's also me inviting people in to their space with their permission to get them to look at issues or get them to look at different ways of practice. So, for example, we've had Auntie Karen Kent come in and do Waiapa with the boys. We've had Chris Hume come in and do some dancing with the boys. We've had David Dunn come and do some painting with some of the boys. And having those respected elders come into the space gives them an opportunity to go, this is something that I wouldn't normally do, but this is still something that belongs in Aboriginal culture. The other thing too is that, I'm also trying to train the boys in how to become good men, but how to become good dads in the future as well. Because we come from a culture that kind of does say that we'd have men's business and women's business, and we should not be able to intertwine some of those together. But the thing that I see is missing sometimes is that a lot of our young Aboriginal men haven't really been shown how to become men, because a lot of their male figures may not be part of their life or have been a negative part of their life or have been in prison or have not dealt with mental health issues themselves. I try to get the boys to tap into their thoughts and feelings quite early. And if I know that this doesn't feel right, let's talk about it now. Let's not wait 10 years or 15 years or have to explore alternative ways of actually coping, which may be not great ways of coping. Let's talk about what we're thinking and feeling in the present. If I've got concerns or worries or I'm stressed out, don't be scared to have those conversations. Don't be scared to go, hey, mate, I really need a yarn with you. Hey, bruz, I really need someone to lean on. Hey, cuz, I really do need someone to hear what I'm thinking at the moment. And I think I also provide that opportunity for the boys at that school. At least I've been there 10 years to do that.
What's the pressure like? I wanted to say, AJ, because it is a well-known school, a high achieving school. Does that put pressure on the boys that you mentor? Like, how do you balance that for them?
I think it does. I think there is high pressure to achieve, but I think the school actually looks at the Aboriginal boys in a very special way, and that is because all the scholarship money that goes into the boys have been raised by the boys themselves through
Oh, that's interesting.
through.
Okay.
I can never say the word properly. Philanthropy,
Philanthropy, yes.
and they reinvest that money in order
Oh.
to allow themselves, but also the boys go, we would like our boys to be able to come here too on a scholarship. So we need to raise the money for our kids to come through as well. I do think the school is really set up in a really great way where the coordinator that looks after the Indigenous program, he's not First Nations at all, but he's been at the school for 30, 40 years,
Mm.
Dr. Robert Smith. The boys absolutely adore him. He gives them space to explore their Aboriginality. He gives us creative license in mentoring the boys in ways that are a collective way, but also in an individual way that the boys may need themselves. And being just having the boys know that I'm there if they need me at all. But it's also a two-way relationship because you know me, I do lots of training. I'm always
Mm.
out, either mental health training, cultural awareness
Mm.
training, deadly yarning training, high emotions. These
Mm.
boys help ground me as
Wow.
well. So I go into the school twice a term,
Hmm.
spend the day with them, and I come out much more grounded because these boys are on the ground and they actually bring me back to reality sometimes to actually go, yeah. Now, I will admit, and I'm on camera and boys won't know, they F up at times. But look, they're really honest with me. They go, AJ, we need your help. We've effed it up. And if they're honest with me, I can actually help. I can actually go, well, yeah, let's talk about this. What didn't
Mm.
work? What did work? Um, and, sometimes, they try to pull the wool over my eyes sometimes, but they forget that I used to be a 15-year-old boy at one stage myself. And I'm normally one or two steps ahead of them. And they're quite surprised that I am one or two steps ahead. Um, I do programs with the non-Indigenous kids as well at the
Hmm.
school. I teach year 9 history of Stolen Gen, a year 10
Oh, lovely.
Stolen Gen. And I have my little support group where the Aboriginal boys will come in, one, to hear my story, two, to rehear my story, but three, to just be this another supportive Aboriginal person in the room with me while I am sharing my story
Mm.
with them. And yeah, I love being at the school. I if I could keep going there for the next 10 years, I definitely would. I also work at Woodley School down in the Mornington Peninsula doing work a
Hmm.
bit, and I work at a couple of other schools, at Brighton Grammar as well, teaching year 9 history around stolen generations, which I've been doing for about 4 years now. So yeah, I love the schools.
It's amazing that you really get to share and with young people and bring that real living experience into those spaces. And has that sort of changed you at all by doing that work with young people?
Um, I would say yes, but it's also made me reflect on my life as well. And I also see how privileged some of the boys are by going to the schools, how it changes socioeconomic status, how some of the boys, this is the first generation that are actually getting to year 12 and
Mm-hmm.
are moving on. Um, it's made me much more reflective. I've opened up a lot about myself growing up, and the boys feel comfortable in asking me those questions. I am in the process of writing a book
Mm.
around some of my experiences,
Wow.
um, based on a lot of poetry that I wrote when I was growing up.
Oh.
So hopefully that might be out in the next year or two. Again, it's just finding the time to actually
Mm.
sit down and do things. Um, but it's made me self reflect as well. And I'm the first person to also admit too, I'm not the expert in everything. Some people see me as the expert. Yes, I've got knowledgeable skills in mental health and I've got life experience of stolen gen, but I'm not the expert on everything Aboriginal. And
Mm.
I learn with the boys at the same time sometimes when we have guest speakers come in, because again, it's about hearing other people's stories. It'd be like, and that's again why I put the YouTube channel together, because I could ask the same questions to every single person. And sometimes I do. I ask every guest on all the time, what does cultural safety mean to you? Or what does reconciliation mean to
Mm.
you? But we've heard 100 different versions of what it means to people, what it means to Aboriginal people. And so there's no one Aboriginal version or opinion. There's many opinions. And that's in my courses, I always try to talk about the plurals. We've got Aboriginal peoples, we've got Torres Strait Islander peoples, knowing that there's more than one particular Aboriginal group, more than one, we've got histories out there. We've got ways of being and doing. There isn't just one way. And what I try to get the boys to actually see at the school and in the mentoring programs is the many different ways of being Aboriginal. And there is no just one way. And no way's right or no way's wrong. It's exactly how they're experiencing it and how they're feeling it right now in the moment.
I love that
I feel like
statement.
I feel like I'm being interviewed on my show.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
fun.
I wanted to say I'm learning a lot, and I think that really makes me feel so at peace when you say that. It is no right way of being Indigenous, and I
Yeah,
think that's really so affirming for me, because it's like you don't have to do things a certain way, isn't it? We all bring our own living experience of what identity is,
yeah,
and how we um, come to terms with who we are, and what aspects of culture and that we embrace and take in and adopt and it mesh it in with ourselves. So I wanted to thank you for that, because that's important, I think, for everyone to hear. That one thing about you is you never really are judgmental with people. And, I can sincerely say that, someone who's known you for quite a few years, that, you've always been embracing, honest, and you allow the person to be themselves and with all their flaws and that, because that's what makes it unique. But you always give people an opportunity, which I think is so important. I wanted to ask you this, and
yeah,
for those people out there, because as you know, I've experienced sometimes a bit of, uh, I don't know if you call it hate, or lateral violence. How do Why do you think people do that, AJ? Like, because I sometimes struggle with that. Is what's the best way you think to cope with something like that, and why should we really understand that it's not a healthy way of being for our community?
I personally think it's jealousy, and sometimes it's professional jealousy. Sometimes it's personal jealousy. It's about I think I can do this, but really I don't have the skills or knowledge to do it, and I'm quite jealous that this other person's being able to achieve this particular either academically achieve something or professionally achieve something, or have had the community recognition to do something. I've always followed cultural protocols. I always talk to elders. I get on really well with the Bunurong elders and the Wurundjeri elders, who I share my experiences with and let them know where I'm up to with things. But for me, doing that, I am following cultural protocols at all times. But I also got their support and endorsement for what I do. And so when I get hit with that lateral violence or that community violence, I'm able to pull back. And my first supporters are often the traditional custodians that actually go, we know AJ, we trust AJ, AJ's with us. I know I'm just watching the time because we actually have to wrap it up. And I'm the one wrapping it up, and I feel like I'm the one that's being interviewed, which has been fantastic for my 100th
Well, darling, I really wanted to also, because it helps me learn about myself, and I really wanted to share that with everyone because you have been one person who's really supported my journey and really given me that support to keep going when I felt like I couldn't, or just to hide my identity because I felt sometimes that, where do you go if people just, don't accept you or don't like you? So I wanted to really thank you. What the skills that you bring to the community is amazing. And your resilience, your genuine giving, and I'm so honored to have been part of your 100th podcast, and I can't wait for your next 100 because, especially when your book comes out, because I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot more about you, and I think that I guess my final thing before we close is, what footprint do you want to leave, AJ?
I think that the key message I want people to leave, well, I want to leave is that, I will leave my footprint, but it's the beginning and allowing other people's footprints to follow on behind me. And even though sometimes I see myself as a leader, I don't always lead at the front. I do when I'm in a classroom setting sometimes, but sometimes I sit in the group and I learn with them. I teach from the side sometimes. I set up stages for people to perform themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean I have to be the one performing. And I think my footprint will be there for people to remember, but for people to actually go, AJ gave me a chance. AJ trusted me to be me. AJ loved me for being me. And AJ always reminded myself that no one can love yourself but yourself as the first starting point.
Yeah. Wow, what a way to finish off. It's been an absolute honor hearing you on your 100th podcast.
And thank you very much, because we'll let everybody know this wasn't scripted this way. We just automatically came this way. Guys, I want to say thank you very much for hanging with us. Ricki, love you and all your work, and we'll catch up again soon.